Well, welcome back, and as I said in this particular episode, we're just going to very simply and quickly add back in the audio that we exported at the beginning of the series. In order to do that, all I'm just going to do is come over to the audio track, click on this small disclosure arrow, and just select Add Audio. And now I'm just going to navigate to the folder where I bounce the audio to, and that's here in Audio. And I'm just going to click on and select the AIF version that we exported. Just double click and in it comes. Now, as you can see, it's slightly longer in duration than the actual video and the still image, so I'm just going to pull that back, and that actually also brings the vignette layer that we added as well. And so from here on in, all I'm going to do is just control click on it and bring up the control parameters, and I'm definitely going to reduce the audio. I'm going to reduce that all the way down to 10%, because that was very loud, and I'm going to add in a 3-second fade in and a 3-second fade out, and let's just give it a whirl. Right, so there we have it. Now, something else you can also consider to perhaps maybe activate this a little bit more is to introduce a subtle bit of animation, namely keyframing. And by keyframing this, what we could potentially do is to give the illusion of possibly maybe zooming in, so it's kind of growing within the context of the frame, or it can kind of pan left or pan right very gently. Again, just to give the illusion that the camera is kind of like moving in and zooming in on the falls. And in order to do that, the best thing would be to actually bring this back in as a composite video into a new file. And so that means that I will then need to render this out. And this is going to be just exactly the way we will eventually render this out for deployment on the web. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up under File, and I'm going to come down to Export, and I'm going to come down to Render Video. Now, if this is the first time you're actually rendering something else, it may take a little bit of time for it to think about before it launches the Render Video dialog box. And what I'm going to do is, there's a number of parameters here. I'm going to rename this underscore and imhq. I'll explain exactly why. And I come down to the Adobe Media Encoder, and by default it usually comes up in terms of the format as H.264, which is the compression codec that we will eventually use in order, as I say, to bring this down to a nice manageable size file for deployment on the web. But what I want to do is actually switch it over to QuickTime and have the preset of animation high quality, hence why I named it NMHQ. Now, QuickTime animation high quality is basically going to be a lossless render, in as much as there's going to be absolutely no compression put onto this render whatsoever. And that's going to be useful because what I don't want to do at this juncture is to render it out with compression on, bring it in, and then render it out again for deployment on the web with compression on it again. It's almost like becoming it's almost like a photocopy of a photocopy. The quality will sort of slightly denigrate by doing that. But just a little bit of a warning that if you are going to do this, just make sure you've got a fairly generous amount of disk space left, because even with just a minute, this is going to result in an extremely large file. Even on a movie of about just a minute's length, this is going to be somewhere in the region between 6 to 8 gigabytes. Yeah, so that's pretty big. I'm going to leave the document frame rate at 30 frames per second, and I'm just going to render this out. So while this is exporting away, I'm just going to end it here, and then in the next episode we're going to bring the new composite movie back in, and we're going to add some keyframing.